Have you ever fantasized about being in a world where gods and humans walked freely? Well, the book Tower of Nero by Rick Riordan serves your needs. This is the 5th book in the Trials of Apollo series, and it features our protagonist Apollo, who is a god that has been banished to the earth and now has to serve a demigod named Meg McCaffrey. In this book specifically, we follow Apollo as he attempts to regain his godhood by defeating this mad Emperor Nero. We start in Manhattan, and throughout the story we see Apollo grow and mature from an arrogant god to a more sympathetic and loyal human. In the story, we see Apollo go back to Camp Half-Blood on Long Island and reunite with their friends to devise a plan to storm the Tower of Nero and in hopes of defeating him. So I'm going to be discussing different themes and ways that Rick Riordan makes such a good book. So after this part, there's going to be a lot of spoilers, so I do recommend reading this book before coming back and listening to my opinions. It's a really good book, but I do recommend reading like books 1 to 5. But if you just want to start with this book, Rick Riordan writes this so that you can just jump in whenever. It doesn't matter, but I do recommend starting in earlier books. Alright, so this book ends the Camp Half-Blood / Percy Jackson storyline that precedes this series. There's a few series before this, like obviously Percy Jackson and the Heroes of Olympus series. I highly recommend reading them if you haven't. But Rick Riordan says he wants to focus on other characters in the story. Like in this book, it kind of sets up a new story with Will and Nico, and maybe he can explore the troglodytes a little bit. But he doesn't really want to do any more like spin-offs, whatever. He wants to focus on different things, which is kind of sad for old fans to see Percy Jackson, Annabeth and Hazel, Frank, all of them go, but the story wraps it up really nicely and gives a very satisfying ending. I thoroughly enjoyed Apollo and Meg's journey throughout the Tower of Nero. Their witty banter and brother-sister relationship really like is really like the bread and butter of this story. The novel. But in fact, all of the novel characters are well written. Every single character, like there's about 10 different characters, and each of them are very nuanced and feel unique. Like they feel like real people that you might see on a street somewhere. So which is really impressive. So Rick Riordan's writing style is very unique, in part because of the way he sets it up. Like it's set in modern day, but in a universe where gods, deities are intermixing with people. Like they exist and they're real. So which is really interesting. And the author uses imagery, personification, suspense exceptionally throughout the story, and Rick Riordan's unique use of humor and personification is very present in each of the characters. So, which makes all of their precarious situations all the more heart-wrenching to deal with. Like, you actually feel and care for each of the characters, which is like very rare for me. It's very hard for me to care for like any type of characters in a novel just because I can't really see them. But each of the characters, like I said, feel real. And Apollo is a very compelling protagonist, and you want him to succeed. Every time he defeats Python and he defeats Nero, you feel good. Like you want him to succeed. You're goading him on like every step of the way. And like ideally you want each of your characters to like be nuanced, be layered, like I said, and the Tower of Nero goes even further by making a likable villain. So for me, a likable villain is someone that you want the hero to win against him, but at the same time you're kind of sad to see them go. Like whenever the hero actually beats them, you're kind of sad to see them go. So and Nero is like perfect. He's a charismatic psychopath, and it almost makes him like you almost want him to succeed. Like you almost want him to beat Apollo. So it's kind of hilarious that way. But he's a very compelling, very compelling villain, and he's cruel to the core. You absolutely hate him. But at the same time, there's just the thing in the back of your mind, like he's really funny. I kind of want him to stay around, but that just goes to show how well like each of the characters is crafted. Another tool that that Rick Riordan uses like very effectively is suspense. Like ideally, like when you're crafting a story, you want those like high suspenseful moments, then right after it followed by a very lighthearted, funny scene, and there's plenty of that. Like a lighthearted and funny scene to sell like the suspenseful moment, and for the most part, Rick Riordan does this very well. Like for example, there's this very like dark and depressing scene where Lugus Elwa and Apollo and Meg get caught, and Lugus Elwa, like because Lugus Elwa betrayed Nero, Nero cuts off Lugus Elwa's hands, and that scene is like super suspenseful. Right after that, like almost immediately after that, there's this very calming scene, and like everything just like goes from 11 to 0 really quickly. So it lets you like, I don't know, it doesn't put the level at 100% all the time, and then it doesn't like give you fatigue. It keeps like, it just like goes up and down, and it's like it keeps you interested. Like if I were to think like throughout this book, I don't think there was one point that I wasn't interested in the story. Like they kept enough threads around to get you thinking, and the pacing is done very well so that like you never feel burnt out in one point in the story. So the book is like such a joyride to go through. I would highly recommend this book to anyone. Like anyone who just likes a good story should like pick up these books and indulge themselves in it. Like the book is like so good that I think I read it within 1 week, within like 3 days. I finished the entire book. I just kept like reading, and I still reread the book to this day. So that just like every single time, it's just so much fun to read. So like I said, you should pick up this book. Anyone who likes an action thriller type story, like a humorous, sort of a little bit like a satire, but there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff for you to chew on in this book, and like I said, this is the 5th book, so I do recommend new readers start from book 1 and keep on going. If you really like this series, I do recommend like the Percy Jackson series, the Heroes of Olympus series, because they all give like context, or like they all happen before this, and all of them are like equally good, but those obviously are earlier works, so they're not as polished as I would say. They're probably not as great as the Trials of Apollo, but they're all really good.